Format. I'm Sven Harvey.
And I'm David Sabili.
As you can probably tell, we're having a look at one of the larger franchises from PlayStation 1 that hasn't quite got the popularity it used to, and that is WipEout. As you probably know, WipEout 1 came out on the launch of the PlayStation 1 here in the UK. It had been demoed for weeks beforehand, hadn't it, in all the stores. They basically put a PlayStation 1 on the big screen, the original demo model that was then, this was running, and people were like going, wow.
Mind you, it really helped that most game stores that had that actually plugged their sound system into it for the music, because let's face it, the music for these games has always been awesome. Now I know that depending on the version, some of it has been licensed and other of it has been cold storage. And let's face it, cold storage is just phenomenal. So much so that I have this album on. No, I don't. I have Pure. I have Pure on my PlayStation 3. So when I'm playing certain games, I'll turn off the in-game music and switch it over to the individual tracks that you put on yourself. I'll have that music running just because it adds a very different feel to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, the soundtrack on WipEout HD isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. But what was interesting with PlayStation 1's original WipEout was the fact they licensed a lot of music tracks for it. There's a little bit of cold storage on there. Cold storage is also known as Tim Wright and did music for things like Shadow of the Beast 2 and 3 and various other things.
Lots of things that you're a big fan of, he did the music
too. Yeah, now this was the first time that a company had really licensed a bunch of music from different places to go onto a game.
One thing.
And really did stand it in good stead. It was one of the things that really grabbed attention when it came out, even to the point where this CD came out on the cover of a magazine. Now,
that's got a great backstory to it.
Yeah, it has. Now, what's interesting is that all the tracks on there actually was one track. They're all merged together. But this is the second version because they released it initially with the wrong version of the CD on, with some music on they weren't supposed to have a clue because they hadn't got the license for it.
Yeah, they had to pull it off sale, which really did some damage to the magazine.
Now, what's interesting is this came out on PC as well. Now, you're probably wondering why that happened. And it also came out on the Saturn, for that matter. Both the PC and the Saturn version didn't have the licensed music on, they just had the cold storage stuff. Now, the interesting thing is about that is these first three were released by Psygnosis. Well, obviously, Shadow Beast, blah, 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 blah. And they were owned by Sony Electronic Publishing at the time. So they were allowed to produce them for other consoles as well, in other formats. So,
mind you saying that, just because you mentioned it in the, I have to say to anybody that's really into the game, who already knows and loves it, don't get the Saturn version of the game. They did played it in that little tiny box.
It was like Tomb Raider and Quake at the time, wasn't it? It's just like
it was one of those crossover things, and let's face it, me and you know plenty of collectors. Normally things like Worms and Amiga games where they go, I want it in every format. Seriously, don't. It's just not worth it.
Now, a year after WipEout came out, they did WipEout 2097, where again they pushed the music even more. Now, you were finding that this electronic music, which was underground up until this point, started to get into mainstream and was pushing,
and specifically in games.
Yeah, and was really pushing video gaming into mainstream. Because up until the PlayStation 1, it was really quite a niche.
It was still,
and PlayStation 1, mainly because of the marketing that Sony put behind it, but when they were doing things like this, really grabbed attention. And you got to the point where WipEout was turning up in nightclubs because of the music and things like that, which was just like.
Had nothing to do with the fact that we knew some DJs.
No,
nothing at all.
Now, WipEout 2097 actually got released on PlayStation 1, obviously, with the licensed music, but it also got released on the PC, again, with a cold storage set of music. So
actually, I have to say, the music on that version of the game is very good, but I tended to play that version a couple of years later on the Mac.
Yes, absolutely. Now, what's interesting is between it being released on PlayStation and PC and the Mac, this got released.
Yes.
Now this is a strange one. You'll notice the Blittersoft logo there, as well as Psygnosis's. This is actually the Amiga version of the game, which is going to blow a few minds.
That's a Power PC Amiga version.
You have to have an Amiga with a Power PC processor to run this, but it has got all the music as CD tracks from PC version, which goes quite nicely with this, which is the soundtrack from WipEout 2097, but it's actually the PlayStation soundtrack because it's got all the licensed music that weren't on the PC version. So I've got both options.
Chop and change as to what you prefer.
Absolutely. So that's actually one of the bizarre things about that is it came out a couple of years after the PC version did. And it's actually better than the PC version.
Yeah, because the graphics had moved along by that.
Yeah, and you could use graphics cards on Power PC Amigas in the big boxes.
And also, I don't want to say that, you know, it's specifically a geek thing.
Yeah.
But people who really love their formats put a lot of time and effort into it, and anybody that's ever worked on the Amigas always puts a lot of effort into it.
Yeah, and you can tell the amount of effort to the point where it actually allows multitasking. You can play this in a window on Workbench and be doing stuff as well, which is just like, okay, that's bizarre.
I think they did that just to show.
Just to show off.
Amiga
Yeah, it did turn up
that.
at a few events actually running on Amigas. People were just going, really? Okay. There was a big jump actually from WipEout 2097 to WipEout 3. What was interesting with this, and American viewers, just so you know, WipEout 2097 was known as WipEout XL in the States. So just before you're wondering what that about, yeah, WipEout 3 had a massive jump in the graphical quality of the game. They'd basically broken down a barrier or something in the programming and realised quite what the PlayStation 1 could actually do all of a sudden. And this does look significantly better than the previous two. Now, as a result of that, what they'd ended was Special Edition, which is basically WipEout 3, but with the good bits from the first two put in as well, in the higher res. So that's actually probably the best version of the game on the PlayStation 1, simply because you've got all the good bits of the others.
And yet, the ironic thing is, this one feels like a massive step back.
Absolutely, which is a bit of a shame. Now, one thing you will notice about these two is that one says Psygnosis on the front and one says Sony Computer Entertainment.
That was the
big switch over time. Yeah, between these two releases, Psygnosis was fully folded into Sony Computer Entertainment, which had been just formed from what was Sony Electronic Publishing.
Yeah.
So basically, it all come together, and that's basically what Sony Entertainment. Computer Entertainment was. So Psygnosis became Studio Liverpool, essentially. And it was then they went on to do WipEout Fusion. Now you could tell that there was a change in staff for this, because it doesn't really feel the same as the previous.
It's definitely, out of all of them, including the handhelds, it's the weakest game.
Yeah. Now a lot of people assume that's the only PlayStation 2 one, but we'll come back to that in a moment. It was a reasonably good game, but it was not as jaw-dropping as the others. It just didn't grab so much attention. The gameplay itself seems sluggish.
There's nothing very clever in it either.
No, and to be honest, a death knell of any WipEout game is me being able to use the word sluggish.
Yeah. That
doesn't work. So after that, again, there was a lot of changes in staff at Studio Liverpool. The PlayStation Portable came along, PSP. And they did WipEout Pure on the PSP. Now there's a good reason why it's called WipEout Pure, because they literally stripped back the concept of WipEout, and essentially this has got all of the speed and urgency and combat of WipEout 2097, which some people see as the best of the formats, though I would argue for that one.
Pure is the one that I go back to every time. I mean, okay, I'll admit, Joe no Navita. And whenever we're in the pub, it's what you normally use to keep me quiet while you go off and make phone calls, is because, you know, WipEout is amazing on the Vita. But I still play Pure. I love Pure. It's just one of those pick-up downloadable games. It was very clever.
It really did push what people thought of the PSP. Yeah, it did grab attention and did very strongly show how much more advanced this was than the DS, I would argue. What was interesting is WipEout Pulse wasn't really a big jump up from it.
No, it was just another game.
Yeah, it's another game in the series. But to be honest, there wasn't a lot more they could do. I think and the tracks were wider. There was a couple of new features added in. But you know, it was a solid release.
Now, before we get to the Vita version,
Mhm.
which I have to say, phenomenal. You've got to go back. You've got to go back and tell people.
What was
why there's
interesting
another...
actually is once they'd done these two games on the PSP,
Mm.
there was 2 projects
Yes.
launched from here. One was WipEout HD. The other one was a bit strange, which actually came out after the WipEout HD original download game, which was WipEout Pulse on the PlayStation 2.
Yeah.
Which is mind-blowing.
I mean, it's good that they continued producing for the PS2 when the PS3 was released.
Yeah.
But a really strange choice.
Yeah, and they'd actually done that with a few games. There was a handful of games that were originally on PSP, which were then ported to PS2, because they'd basically stopped PS2 game development, but they realised it was really easy to port things back
stuff
from
over.
the PSP to the PS2.
Isn't that weird? Because normally you find port overs to be the other way.
Absolutely. So they actually had that project going on while they were also merging WipEout Pure and Pulse to create WipEout HD. Now, I haven't played WipEout Pulse on the PS2, unfortunately. I will get it eventually. But
It's one of those eventual things.
It's an eventual thing because it's currently, it's a lot of money. I mean,
They
this
go
is
for like £40 or £50.
yeah, I mean, this is
still.
it's still sealed. It's 30, 40, 50 quid. Simply because it was only released in Europe. Just like I believe WipEout 3 Special Edition was only released in Europe. So I haven't quite got that yet. But what they did is they basically merged the two together, brought it into high def, but not just normal high def. They did it in full high def at 1080p.
Yes, for like
And it runs
60.
60 frames a second.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? And now, considering we've currently got games on PS4 and especially the Xbox One,
They're still
struggling to do 1080p at 60 frames a second. It's just like...
Now, I know about the DLC for this
Mhm.
because it's great. But you told me some interesting stuff about the Vita version, which I didn't know.
Oh yes, this is where it gets really interesting. When they were developing the Vita version in WipEout 2048, they were actually doing it while the machine was still in development.
Yeah,
Now one of the
because
things...
that's why they got the two
sticks, yeah. I mean, it was basically WipEout developers, Studio Liverpool, and some of the other British studios.
Throw a link in at the bottom of the video. We reviewed the Vita a while ago and we went into the whole back history of the
so we'll link
control
that in.
sticks.
Actually, there we go. There's a link for you. What was interesting is when they were developing this, one of the things they wanted to do is show off everything the Vita could do.
Yeah.
So
And they succeeded.
And they succeeded completely. You can use the cameras to take a photo of yourself in the game. You can use the 6-axis to
I was
control
about to
the
say,
ship.
that is horrendous.
Don't do that.
I've tried that and I know.
Because that's actually the default when you pick it up.
Yeah.
And you're just like, no, let's use the sticks. You can use the back panel to do your acceleration. You can use the front touchscreen to release a weapon. One of the things you'll find in there is actually it's got a little bit of WipEout HD in there, because what you can do is the WipEout HD track layouts are in it, so you can play against people who are playing on the PlayStation 3 on WipEout HD, which is great.
Yeah.
So cross-play over the network, and you're up against people who have got a big TV and can see things better than you can.
But more than that, if you purchased this for the download,
yes, absolutely,
and you've purchased that for the download.
Well, either download or the physical.
Oh, it does with the physical as well?
There is some DLC for this.
You get the complete unlocks.
Yes. Now, what the DLC for this is actually the campaigns from WipEout HD and the campaign from WipEout Fury, WipEout HD Fury. So, if you own the download of that, you get the DLC for this for free as a download, because it just appears. Now, what's interesting is that you can probably pick this up reasonably cheaply as the cartridge.
Yeah.
But it is available as a download for about...
I know I go on about having the actual physical, but to be absolutely fair, the downloads are really... I mean, it's one of the things that annoys me as a very proud waver of the Xbox flag, is that Sony tend to do things so much better.
Yeah.
The DLC content being cross-networked is just so clever. Yeah,
I mean, you're getting this a lot as well now, because there's certain games where if you buy it on the PS3, You get the
It's
Vita
across,
version
yeah.
and you get the PS4 version for free,
It's
which is just crazy. So it's the same price in all the formats.
Well, you see, I've come to the conclusion that once I own a certain amount of it on the PS3, I'll just get a Vita because I'm going to have all the games really done.
And if you get PlayStation Plus, you
You
start
get so many
jacking those
downloads
off as well. So yeah, absolutely. What I would say though is WipEout 2048 is a really, really good game. It does have some nice features because it's set before the original PlayStation version, because that's 4 years before this one's set. It's gone back to the male voice because the female voice was
Yeah, it was for the later series.
You have got very retro sounding engines
Yeah.
in it, and you've also got a situation where the tracks are partially in the streets on a fictional city, which is quite cool. However, the one drawback, quite major drawback with that, is it's the only one out of the entire series you cannot play on a TV at the moment.
Yes.
Because these can be played through a PSP Slim onto a telly.
Yeah.
And I would have to say that the WipEout experience is complete more on a bigger screen to a certain degree. Okay, with these two, they don't look so great on a high def screen, so perhaps on the PSP, but it's a nice option to have to be able to play them, which is why I was kind of hoping we'd see that on the PS4. We'll come back to that in a second. The other big drawback with this one is the loading times. When it first came out, the loading times were absolutely horrendous.
They have got that a lot better.
They've got it a little better, but it's still, it does sort of like really break your gaming. It breaks the flow of it as you're playing through it, which is a bit of a shame. So if you were looking at your first WipEout game to play, and you've got more than one format out of these, then perhaps that's not the one to go with. Unless, of course, the only two formats you have are the Vita and the PS2. Then I'd still go with that one.
Yeah, I'd still go with that one.
But if you've got a PlayStation 3, you start there.
Yeah, it's great. But totally. However, you know me, I still love my PSP. I will get round to getting a Vita at some point, but right now that's not happening. So I say pure.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. It's a great game.
Absolutely.
It's a great game. It encompasses the feel.
Yes.
Everything before it. The music on it is it's just a really well-rounded game. Absolutely. And very importantly, really easy to just pick up and put down.
I mean, I will caveat that. I mean, it's a really, really good idea to go with that if you've got a PSP. And though both of these are available as downloads for the Vita, again, because the content in them is basically in the DLC for this, then probably not the greatest move.
No.
The one thing you probably want to avoid as well, unfortunately, is that out of the PlayStation 1 games, only one of them is available as a PS1 classic download. At the moment, and that's the first one.
It's still good, but you do get the really retro feel.
Yeah, it does feel very much like a throwback compared with all the others.
But saying that, you know when you're purchasing a PS1 game, you're going to get that.
WipEout 2097 was actually available for a short period, but there was some problem with licensing with it.
Wasn't it the music?
Yeah, I think so. It's a real shame that's not.
To be fair though, anybody that purchased that did get a refund.
Yes, absolutely. But one thing that's worth bearing in mind is if you've got a PlayStation 3 at home and you want to try out one of these on either the PSP or the Vita, you can actually put the disc in your PlayStation 3 and play them through. Which is quite nice on remote play, which is quite decent. So I have done that on more than one occasion on that, to be fair. But this is all the past now. I mean, we've got the soundtracks there, because the WipEout Pure soundtrack is great as well.
Well, hang on.
Oh,
you're talking about the future, and yes, it was on the list originally for the PS4, but that disappeared when Studio Liverpool disappeared.
Yes, which was a massive shame, because they were really... It looked like it was going to be a launch title.
Yeah.
But interestingly... Interestingly, because Drive Club was also supposed to be a launch title, and that's gone back and gone back and gone back. It's from Evolution Studios, where some of the WipEout team actually ended up.
I thought they all ended up at the studio that did... had the robots in it.
Playroom.
That's the one.
Yes,
I
actually,
ended up
the
there.
core of the team have actually ended up at that studio, and they've done Playroom, which I hope means that perhaps they're working on something, because they are working on another PlayStation 4 product, but they haven't announced what they are yet. So with
Do you think they may have carried it over?
I'm hoping so, I really am, because
it would be a shame. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do like the Vita version, but it would be a shame if that's the one they go out.
We could do with seeing WipEout 2048 or a sequel to it with the WipEout 2048 tracks in on the PS4, because if they could do what they did with WipEout HD on the PS3, the hell are they going to be able to do on a PS4?
And with the new controller as well, that should be really quite impressive.
Cool, really cool.
Right, so, any last thoughts?
No, just if you've got a PS3, get this download, absolutely. If you've got a Vita, if you've got a PSP, try out WipEout Pure. Absolutely worth it. For the cost of the download of that, it's a no-brainer. But we'll put some links for some of the downloads below, because now PlayStation Store is available on the web as well.
I think that about wraps it up. So thank you very much for watching.
And don't forget, you can subscribe to us here on YouTube, so please consider that. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and we have got our own website for both Format and Geekology. And also, if you haven't watched any Geekologies yet, give them a go, because there's one or two of those you might like. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Good night.